God, we believe for it. And we are right in the middle of our Just Believe series. I say in the middle, we're on 10 out of 11 weeks. And tonight we're talking about believe together. We've got a great passage to be looking at this week. It's in John, of course, and it's in chapter 17, and it's verse 20 to 21. And I'll read it to you now. It says, I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you. And may they be in us, so that the world will believe you sent me. It's an incredible passage. And I think one of the biggest things that struck out to me as I read that is Jesus prayed for us. Jesus prayed for you. He prayed for me. He prayed for our children. He prayed for our parents. Jesus, the Son of God, God himself, prayed for us. And that blows me away every single time that, God, who doesn't really need to speak to his Father in that sort of way, does so anyway, because he cares so much that he wants us to be in him, and he wants us to believe in him, to believe that he was sent for us. Now, what we're looking at today is a couple of the foundations of just why I believe in what I believe, and perhaps why you believe in what you believe. And, it's all sort of summed up in something called C.S. Lewis's trilemma. And it reads this. He says, I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him, about Jesus. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come away with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us, and he didn't intend to. So what we're going to look at tonight is whether Jesus was a lunatic, a liar, or indeed Lord. So we're going to start things off by looking at, who Jesus said he was. And throughout John, there is a collection of different names that he calls himself. And he gives himself all sort of titles, like the Good Shepherd is in there. But there are a few crucial bits that I wanted to touch on. And it starts off way back in Jesus's baptism. We read in Matthew, in 3:17, and a voice from heaven said, this is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. So there's the first time that Jesus has heard the voice of his Father claiming him to be his Son. Now, we're going to jump around through a fair few bits of the Bible, and if you want to follow along with the various Bible verses, scroll down. They're all written down, and you'll still be able to hear me, and you can scroll back and see me waffle on. So there we go. That's the first one. So at his baptism, Jesus has been told that he is the Son of God. We wind on a little bit to Matthew 17. Matthew 17 is all about the transfiguration. And again, Jesus hears this very similar message. In verse 5, it says, but even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud, God again, said, this is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. listen to him. So that's twice. Jesus has heard, he's been affirmed that he is the Son of God. This is what he believes, and this is what he holds dear to him. And we see as he goes on through his life that he brings that out, and he is so confident of who he is. If we read in John 10, verse 30, it says, "The Father and I are one." He knows that he is part of the Father, that the Father is part of him. He knows who he is. He knows he's this deity. And then a little bit further on in John 14, verse 6, it says, Jesus told him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me." He knows, he is convinced of his deity. He's convinced of who his Father was, and he's convinced of his role for humanity. That's Jesus's claim throughout the Gospels, that he was the Son of God. So when we look at whether he's a lunatic, a liar, or Lord, that's Jesus's opinion of himself. So let's look at the first one of these things. Was Jesus a lunatic? Now, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say, no, he wasn't. But let's give it a little bit of thought. Let's delve into this a little bit more. And there's a great book that goes through this and so many other things that I've used for tonight. And it's called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And it is a wonderful unpicking of all the physical evidence for Christ being who he says he is. And in there, we get to hear from a chap called Gary Collins. He's got a PhD in clinical psychology, so I think he kind of knows what he's talking about. And he assesses whether, Jesus had what's called delusional psychosis. Perhaps he believed that he was all this. Perhaps he believed that he was the Son of God, but maybe he was just a lunatic and wasn't that at all. Now, of course, if Jesus was a lunatic, then we'd see this. We'd see that outplayed in the things that he did and the way that he carried himself as a person. Now, we read throughout the Gospels of the many, many miracles that Jesus performed. If he was a lunatic, if he wasn't who he claimed he was, then there's no way that he'd have been able to perform all of those many miracles. And it's portrayed in his personality as well. And this Gary Collins says this about Jesus. He's read through all of the Gospels, read through all of his teaching, and Gary Collins, this clinical psychologist, says this of Jesus: he was loving, but didn't let his compassion immobilize him. He didn't have a bloated ego, even though he was often surrounded by adoring crowds. He maintained balance despite an often demanding lifestyle. He always knew what he was doing and where he was going. He cared deeply about people, including women and children who weren't seen as being important back then. He was able to accept people while not merely winking at their sin. He responded to individuals based on where they were at and what they uniquely needed. All in all, I just don't see that Jesus was suffering from any known mental illness. He was much healthier than anyone else I know, including me. I think that is a beautiful summation of Jesus's personality. Loving, but that didn't stop him from doing the things that he was sent to do. So I think it's safe to say that Jesus was no lunatic. Let's look at the next one. Was Jesus a con man or a liar or perhaps a demon of hell? Well, again, I'm going to put it out there. No, I don't think he was. But let's look at the possible options that are out there. Perhaps Jesus was a hypnotist. Now, some have suggested that, but I don't think it carries any weight at all. I don't think it's convincing in the slightest. They suggest it because, he didn't have any power in Nazareth. And he couldn't even convince his brother James, who perhaps knew him best of all. And he moved around a lot so as not to go back to the same place where he'd been figured out. But that doesn't make any sense, does it? It doesn't make any sense. How on earth could you hypnotize great crowds of people? the feeding of the 5,000, there's 5,000 men plus women and children. You can't hypnotize such a great crowd. I just don't think it holds any power whatsoever. So let's look at the next one then, shall we? Perhaps instead of being a hypnotist, he was a liar. Perhaps he was just making it all up. Well, again, I don't think he was. So let's just look at a few of the options that we had for him. So I think the biggest way that we can convince ourselves that Jesus was no liar is by looking at the empty tomb. It is evidenced throughout the Bible and elsewhere that Jesus was laid to rest in that tomb at Easter time. Now, what happened to his body? There are three options for that, isn't there? Now, either the authorities took it away because they knew that something special was going to happen. Well, if they took his body, why wouldn't they just present it to the adoring crowds? End of discussion, finito. They didn't do that, did they? Now, what about say the believers took the body? Not quite sure how they would have. The tomb was heavily guarded, big stone in front of it. Not sure how they would, but say they did. Why on earth would they be willing to suffer the ultimate sacrifice? Why would they be willing to be tortured? Why would they be willing to be crucified themselves for something they knew to be a sham? No, that doesn't hold any weight at all. The only suggestion that works for me is that his body was gone. Jesus had been resurrected. That's the only way that you can explain the empty tomb to me. So I don't think he was a lunatic. I don't think he was a con man. I don't think he was a liar. Perhaps was he a demon? Well, again, no, I don't think he was. But let's look at the evidence, shall we? Now, if I've got a couple of points that I wanted to pick out here. Let's just see. If he was a demon possessed, if he was. Now, some of the authorities did kind of think that. In John 10, 20 and 21, it says this. Some said, he's demon possessed and out of his mind. Why listen to a man like that? But others replied, this doesn't sound like a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Well, there's no reason why a demon would open the eyes of the blind, is there? Why would he work against his own master? Why would he work against the work of Satan, of the enemy? And sure enough, it goes on to say that, doesn't it? We read in Matthew 8, 28 and 29, it says, when Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of Gardanese, two men who were possessed by demons met him. They came out of the tombs and were so violent that no one could go through that area. This is, of course, the famous story of Legion, the person filled with so many demons. They began screaming at him, why are you interfering with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time? Even demons knew that Jesus was the Son of God. Even demons didn't think that he was part of them. So why on earth should we believe that? So again, I don't think that Jesus was a lunatic, a liar, a con man, or a demon. So we've only got one other option for us, haven't we? We've only got one other option, and that he is the Son of God. He is our Lord. But perhaps, you could say that maybe we're just using too much evidence from within the Bible to suggest that he is Lord of all. But one thing that I found out through that book, The Case for Christ, is that there's evidence outside of the Bible for who Jesus was. And that is just incredible to me. It's all well and good believing one book for who he says he is, but when it's written throughout history, to me that makes it even more compelling. And there are three bits of evidence that I wanted to share with you tonight. First of all is something that's a Jewish historian had to say. His name was Josephus, and he's shared two incredible passages with us. Now, Josephus was a Jew. He really didn't like the whole Christian movement and what it was bringing, but he said this. He said, he mentioned Jesus. That's the thing, that's the point of this. In his book, The Antiquities, he says, he convened a meeting of the Sanhedrin and brought before them a man named Jesus. Pardon me. a man named James, the brother of Jesus, who was called a Christ, and certain others. Now, this off-the-cuff mention of Jesus, the story is more about James. There's Jesus. There's a mention of Jesus way outside the Bible. And he goes on in a different one of his letters. It's called the Testimonium Flavianum, which is his biography, I think it was. And he goes into a lot more detail about who Jesus was. And there are a few bits that are a bit questionable in here. They're doubted by some historians, but I'll point them out to you. About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a wise man. For he was one who wrought surprising feats, and was a teacher of such people as accepted the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Christ. When Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the highest standing among us, had condemned him to be crucified, those who had in the first place come to love him did not give up their affection for him. For the prophets of God had prophesied these and countless other marvelous things about him, and the tribe of Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. Now, this is someone who didn't like the Christian movement, and he is going into so much detail about who Jesus was that I think we're left with no other option than to believe him and believe in everything that we read in the Bible. But there's one other incredible thing that I just wanted to share with you tonight. And it happened around the time of Jesus' crucifixion. And on that day, we read in 3 of our Gospels, don't we? We read that the sky went dark. We read that the stars came out in the middle of the day. And it blew my mind to discover that people across the world experienced this darkening of the sky. And a man named Thales, he put this down to, he said that there was a great eclipse of the sun. It became night in the 6th hour of the day, which is noon, bang on the time of Jesus' crucifixion, so that stars appeared in the heavens. And there was a great earthquake in Bithynia, and many things were overturned in Nicaea. Now, there we go. That's incredible, isn't it? There's evidence outside of the Bible for all of these things that we read about. And to me, that solidifies my belief. It solidifies my belief that Jesus was not a lunatic. It solidifies my belief that he was not a con man or a liar or a demon. And it solidifies my belief that he alone is the Lord of everything. Jesus is God. God is Jesus. We've got the Holy Spirit to make up the Holy Trinity. And that is what I believe. And I really hope that you can believe that too. I really hope that this little tour of the evidence of why I believe in what I believe will help you. Will help you just remove some of your doubts. Perhaps it'll help you talk to others about your faith. I think that's always a great challenge, isn't it? Talking to others about what you believe. But when there's so much evidence for what we believe, it becomes so easy, so encouraging, so convincing to tell our story so that others can get to know him and we can believe together. Perhaps so that the world will believe that God sent Jesus. So that the world will believe that God sent Jesus for you and for me. That's my prayer. I'm going to echo Jesus's prayer. Why don't we read that together? Jesus says, I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. I pray, Jesus prays, that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you. May they be in us so that the world will believe that you sent me. Amen. We're going to go into a time of worship now, declaring just exactly what we believe. And then we're going to spend some time in communion together, sharing together in one bread. So please make sure you have your bread and your juice ready for that.